Okay, that looks like everyone. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Erin Higgins, and I'm the program coordinator at the National Association of Federal Retirees Ottawa branch. I would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which the National Association of Federal Retirees Ottawa branch office is located is the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. On behalf of the Ottawa branch, I am pleased to welcome you to today's webinar from the University of Ottawa entitled How to Get Back into an Active Routine After a Long Winter. We welcome our presenter, Dr. Glen Kenny from uOttawa. Dr. Glen Kenny is a professor of exercise, physiology, and director of the HEPRU. He is a fellow of the Canadian Academy of Health Sciences and the American College of Sports Medicine. Over the past 27 years, Dr. Kenny has led numerous studies directed at understanding the effects of heat stress on performance and health, including clinical trials evaluating exercise interventions and managing health and fitness. I would like to give a special welcome to anyone here who is not yet a member of the association. We hope that these webinars will inspire you to join us. And to our members, we hope that these webinars will encourage you to maintain your membership. And just a reminder that you can give the gift of membership. And to learn more about this, please click the link in the chat box to access the National Association website. After today's webinar, the Ottawa branch will send you an email with instructions on how to access the presentation slides, a recording of the webinar, and how to join the association or give the gift of membership. Remember too that you can always invite non-members to register for our webinars as guests, and they can try us out for free. There will be a question and answer period at the end of the webinar, so please type your questions in the chat box throughout the session, and I will read them aloud for Dr. Kenny. Now I'm going to turn the presentation over to our speaker for the afternoon. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Well, good afternoon. Thank you very much, Erin and Linda, for allowing me this honor to speak to the members this afternoon. I'm pretty thrilled to be here, and this gives me an opportunity to really talk about my passion, and that is exercise. And it's something that, I advocate and practice myself. Just before this presentation, I was in the exercise room doing a bit of exercise, even though sometimes we don't really feel like it. And I think it's today's, when we look outside, is a perfect time essentially to get onto this topic, because we're seeing that sun come out, and it's really a time to essentially motivate ourselves to make change and to essentially start ourselves if we haven't been active before. So I think we've all seen this image, and it's an image that essentially reflects the doldrums of winter and the difficulties that we face with long winters. And that is really that level of inactivity, and an excuse to essentially, digress back and essentially see the changes in our patterns of activity from the summer, where we're excited to get outdoors, to the winter where we hunker down, and that can lead to some, important challenges. And we know that staying physically active is important. It's something even in my first year medical classes that I teach and other classes where I try to convince young adults at the age of 20 that they're not invincible, that essentially, while they may be only 20 to 25, that they themselves are at a point at which they've actually reached their peak and they're starting to see changes. And through activity that they can actually maintain it. So one of the things that we have to think about is that during the winter time, one of the challenges we have is trying to be active. And why is that important? It's important because whatever you've gained last summer, you want to preserve that. Because at the end of the day, what happens is we age, there's a deterioration in our physiological function. So that can be your aerobic fitness, and we'll talk a bit about that, your muscle strength, and other physiological changes that can really affect your ability to be well and affect your ability to do basic tasks around the home. So being active is not just, again, having structured physical activity, but is also being active, period. Whether it's even just vacuuming around the house or doing household chores, all of that can be considered physical activity. But the winter certainly does interject some difficulties for us in terms of barriers to physical activity. So one of the things that we have to think about is when we're talking about physical activity is inactivity by itself. And certainly COVID has brought us a new layer to that, because again, on top of winter, we had the restrictions associated with COVID. As you know, we came back in the fall, we had the recurrence of COVID, the rise in December, that essentially put us back into a state of hibernation, full hibernation, if you will, because we could not access those gym facilities. And one of the things that we have to realize is that on top of what we see with aging and the deterioration in physiological function and our ability to do tasks, is the fact that we're going to see pretty marked changes in muscle mass, and muscle mass reductions can affect your strength, can affect your aerobic capacity, and as well your tolerance to physical activity. So what does that mean? That means the enjoyment of doing things and being able to do it without undue fatigue. And as well, if you think about the simplicity of life and walking up the stairs with a bag of groceries without being exhausted at the end of doing that basic task, those are things that essentially can occur. You lose that ability when you are inactive. And I think one of the side effects, obviously, of winter as well is the impact not only on the physical component, but the mental component. And as we'll see later today, physical activity is also important for your cognitive ability, your mental wellness. So one of the things that I always think about from day one when I talk to young adults is that, again, this is an investment in your future when you think about physical activity. And many of you have worked your lifetime in essentially developing this great opportunity for retirement if you're in retirement. And this is a great opportunity for you to enjoy life. And what you want to do is engage yourself in being physically active. But as you're going to see today, you definitely need a very basic capacity that we're going to touch on. So one of the things that we see in the wintertime, and this is something, we talk about, maybe we don't like to talk about, that we've gained a bit of weight. And if we look at the top graph over here, and when we see that the red line and the blue line, essentially through our lifetime, we're gaining weight, especially in our middle age. And that's simply because, again, as we have families, we have more commitments, and we have jobs, we're less able to be physically active. We tend to gain a bit more weight. And then as we get older, unfortunately, we're seeing a decline in weight. But we have to put that in the perspective. The primary loss here is in lean body mass. That's that muscle mass that's so important in being able to, maintain your strength and your physical functioning and your balance and your level of independence, autonomy. But one thing we see with inactivity in the winter, unfortunately, is we gain a bit of weight. Now, it's not the lean body mass that we want. We love to see that we're going to gain. It's actually an increase in body adiposity, which in itself causes us to, or at least puts at greater risk of chronic disease, development chronic disease, or exacerbating pre-existing conditions like type 2 diabetes or hypertension. So one of the things that we want to do as we transition from spring to summer is to realize that physical activity can also prevent a loss of lean body mass, can also help us preserve our normal and stable weight. So one of the things we have to think about as of today is really that reset button. And really we have an opportunity to change our pattern of behavior and to make physical activity a priority, but a fun priority, and one which, if you engage in it correctly, can be exciting because you're going to see important rewards. And in essence, what you're going to feel is invigorated, because again, you have to think about exercise as being one which is going to stress your body, but in a positive way, so that again, when you undergo different stressors, whether it be financial, whether it be emotional, your body will have that resiliency to handle those kinds of stresses. And, those sleepless nights will not be perhaps as pronounced if you were more inactive. So let's spring forward and let's walk through what we need to do to be more active. So first thing we need to understand is, at the end of the day, is when I talk about aerobic fitness, what am I talking about? So one of the things, everything that we do when you're exercising and you start to breathe a bit heavier, the reason we start to breathe heavier is because our muscles need oxygen to do the work. When you go and cut your lawn, when you wash your car, when you do gardening or vacuuming your house, all that requires work by the muscle, and that muscle needs oxygen. It needs that nutrient. And there's two major systems that play into that. And that's the heart that delivers that blood to the working muscle, and your respiratory system that essentially takes the oxygen from the atmosphere, brings it into the lung, exchanges it with the blood. And that gets down to the muscle. And at the muscle needs to be prepared to use that oxygen. So one thing that happens with aging is that the heart becomes weaker. The lungs do not do as well. And at the level of the cells, when it's the muscle cells, well, they're getting the oxygen, but they just don't have the capacity to use it. And this is what we want to change, because as you increase that capacity, that means if you were maybe walking around this large block area and it took you maybe 30 minutes, you can drop that down to 20 minutes and feel great instead of being tired and fatigued, and you find it wears you down. So what ends up happening, and what we really need to understand is as we age, is that there's a rapid deterioration in our capacity to not only take in that oxygen, use it, transport it to the muscles, but also for the muscle to utilize that oxygen. So what physical activity does is delay or prevent a rapid decay in that change in our capacity to use that oxygen. And we need that oxygen to generate the energy that is needed for muscle contraction. That's what it comes down to in a basic way. So as you're doing any kind of physical activity, when you're breathing a little heavier, always think that the reason that these reactions are occurring is because your muscles need that oxygen. So what you want to do, and what we're going to see and talk about, is really preserving. When you see this reduction over here, this reduction and this marked decline, what we want to do is try to preserve that. So there's a few things I want you to remember, is that as we age, there's a decline. The problem is inactivity, and COVID-19 has exacerbated that. So the rate of decline, especially if you're in activity, is quite large. And so you want to protect against that, because as I'm going to talk about in a second, there's a basic minimum that's so important for to make sure we retain our autonomy. So at a young age, there's a bit of a decrease. It starts very young. Unfortunately, we get to 20, we're all excited, and then boom. What does Glenn come up with in class? Well, you're already starting to age, folks. Body's deteriorating. And they're going, I'm only 20, 25. I said, yeah, that's life. That's what happens. And the good thing, though, is that young age, you can raise that level, and that rate of deterioration may be less pronounced. But there's a good end. Even if you've been inactive at this late stage in your life, you can still reverse this. This is what's exciting about that, is through physical activity, you can reverse this downward trend, which, again, remember, that's aging. So one of the things to think about is general physical activity: running, swimming, walking, cycling, playing pickleball. All of those activities are so very important, and we'll look at in more detail what that means. So as I said, one of the things that's most important when we're talking about maintaining our independence is really that basic need for having an elevated aerobic capacity. Because think about it. Any activity, even going from sit to stand, even just standing and sitting upright, you don't realize it right now. We take it for granted. We're sitting here and you're sitting upright, as I am sitting upright. Well, your muscles are contracting and they need oxygen. But if your system can't provide that oxygen, can you imagine not being able, without assistance, to go from sit to stand? Unless, of course, you may have a disability. But the point I'm making is that there's that requirement for oxygen so that the muscles can do its job. So there's a basic minimum, as you can see over here. It's around 15 milliliters of oxygen. So let's put it into perspective, 15. So what that means, 15, if you think about at a young age, college level men and women, as they come into college around the age of 20, 22, their aerobic capacity probably is anywhere from 40 to 50. If you're an elite athlete, you might reach 60 to 70. That's pretty darn good. You got a lot of capacity. Now you can see how you're dropping over time. If you get down to this level, that means you're not going to be able to do the basic things like walk up the stairs, go from sit to stand, in which case now you're going to need assisted living. So it's so important at this stage now to be engaged so that you can maintain your level of independence. And what's important for us to understand, it's never too late to start. And what is important here is to realize that if you are physically active, and you can see at the bottom here, you can delay this loss of independence by 10 to 12 years. Now, the reality is I go to long-term care and I spend time there in large part because my mom is there. The one thing that is difficult to watch is that during COVID-19, in the isolation of the most vulnerable, we saw the reality not only of the winter inactivity, but the isolation of COVID-19, which has caused many to essentially lose their physiological functioning, including my mother's, who now requires assistance. So that's why I want you to understand the importance of physical activity for yourselves. Interestingly enough, we think about exercise and being beneficial, but what we don't think about, we think about, our different vices in life, whether it be smoking, drinking, but we don't think about inactivity as being harmful. Inactivity, as we see in this slide over here, is comparable to what happens with smokers. So essentially, if you are inactive, the effects are comparable on your health as if you were a smoker. So activity, physical activity, can certainly maintain your overall health and maintain a higher level of fitness and reduce your risk of various chronic health conditions that essentially can worsen your overall health status. So what do we need in terms of physical activity? So in a broad way, what we're looking for at a minimum, and I get that you probably think, I don't have time to go be physically active. It's not that you don't have the time, it's you just need to understand what should be considered physical activity. What would be involved in doing physical activity? So when we talk about physical activities, you can see here, 150 to 300 minutes. Now, many of you probably don't exercise by design 7 days a week. What you do want to do is at a minimum, have some level of physical activity, whether it's go for a brisk walk for at least 10 minutes minimum, but you should accumulate at least 150 minutes. But it's not just accumulating volume. What's important to understand, and this is paramount, is the fact that as you do any kind of exercise, you need to have an intensity-driven response. So what do I mean by that? Well, listen, if I don't load my muscle, so if I go weightlifting and I'm only just curling a 1 pound bar, do you think my muscles are going to get stronger? No, I have to load them. I have to put it under stress. When we put our bodies under stress through physical activity, we see a metamorphosis of our body. We see an increase. If we're doing resistance training, we're going to see increase in lean body mass and strength. If I exercise at a relatively high intensity and I'm getting closer to my maximum capacity to utilize oxygen, I work at that intensity. And you'll see that if you work moderate intensity, most people will say to you, oh, I'm out of breath. And that's normal, because when you get into the higher intensities and you're getting closer and closer to your VO2 max, it's harder to talk to somebody. And that's because your rate of breathing is high, so you can bring in more oxygen, so that oxygen get down to the muscles and provide the oxygen and nutrients it needs to develop the requirement for muscle contraction. So that's important. So when you think about exercise, it's not just doing the exercise. You have to also stress the body and get to a certain intensity that will allow the body to say, whoa, okay, now you're putting me under stress. And then the next day you get what's called recovery, regeneration. So after 48 hours, 72 hours, you'll see the next day your body's a little tired, and then your body rebounds back up. And that is what's called compensation. And that means your body is now starting to adapt. It says, whoa, Glenn is pushing me here. I've now got to make some revisions over here. I'm going at the cell level, at the muscle cell level, it's making changes to the machinery. Over time, you're going to see increased muscle blood flow. So you get these new vessels that are growing around the muscle. You're going to get increased areas in the muscle to allow a little bit of oxygen storage and better transport and diffusion of oxygen to the muscle. So it's available immediately, so the muscle can benefit from that oxygen, so it can do its muscle contraction. So volume, certainly important, as we'll see intensity. But the other component to exercise will be that strength training. And strength training is so important because, folks, it is isolating the muscle. And I get a lot of people, And I remember when we started running the clinical trials on diabetes. So we ran a 6-month exercise training. And I love to see my patients that started in 1999. I still see them to this day in the gym. And I like to go for for last because I don't like to spend too much money in the gym, but it's got everything I need in there. And I see some of my former patients who are part of the study, and it's great to see them engaged, not only in aerobic activity, but strength training. And they've managed their diabetes, and it's all been under control for years. But strength training is so important, not just to manage disease, it's also important to maintain your strength and to maintain the muscle quality. So what do I mean by that? Now, when we do strength training, if I'm doing a bicep curl, I'm isolating that muscle. When you're doing aerobic training, you're involving all the muscles, but you're not loading all the muscles in the same way. So when you're doing strength training, by design, you're loading that specific muscle so that it can adapt. Integrate it all together. When you train all the different muscles, it'll help also in your ability to walk. You're going to have better upper body strength. You're going to have more stabilization. When you're better postural stabilization, you're going to feel overall better. You're going to have a little more bounce in your walk. So as I was saying, in terms of muscle strength, why is that so important? Because there is a loss of muscle. Sadly, as we get older, and it's hard. I do resistance training. I was down there before this presentation. Some days I guarantee I don't feel like doing it, but knowing what I know scares me. So I want to be down there. I want to invest in making sure that I maintain that strength so I can do the things that I want to do when I retire in a few years. So that if I want to go for a brisk walk up the mountain, I will have the strength. If I want to carry a bag of groceries, a heavy bag, or move something, I will have the strength to do that. And I'll be able to protect myself in the wintertime if I slip and somehow I need to restabilize that body mass. Remember, the body is a heavy weight and the muscles have to act to stabilize. And when they're not strong, this is the risk of injury to your joints because, again, they're there to try to stabilize those joints. So what do we see? We see that we lose a significant amount of our lean body mass. That's where we saw at the very start that loss of weight. So less muscle means at the bottom, as you see over here, greater weakness and less mobility, both of which increase the risk of falls. Now, this should also be an important slide for you because, again, this comes back down to independence. Now, one of the things we don't think about, and it's probably is, you've maybe given care to a family member in your lifetime. You may be caring for somebody now. And when they require assistance, even when it goes from sitting to standing, it's hard to believe, right? How it can be difficult for somebody to go from sit to stand, an elderly person going from sit to stand. And that's real, folks. That's because, again, you have to imagine and visualize what's happening to that muscle. The muscle it's undergoing a certain level of atrophy, and that essentially it loses its strength as a result of that. So if I'm trying to curl contract my bicep, I don't have that same strength, or contract my leg muscle so I can stand up. So as you see from this figure, what it's telling us is in that white zone. So here's maximum strength at a very young age. But as there's age, there's a deterioration. And as a result of that, there's a zone at which you'll want to maintain. If you get below this level of strength, you're going to lose that independence. You're going to require assistance to get up from your chair. And the problem is during the winter time, folks, we lose that. So you may have said to me, you know what, I'm active in the summer, not so active in the winter. Unfortunately, that inactivity accelerates that age-related decline. But the good story is if you engage now in strength training and start now, again, I get some people don't want to go to the gyms. They always think about the meatheads and the people that go in the gym and they're always, maybe they're louder than others. What I love is when I go to the gym and I see people my age, older adults that are engaged in exercise training and they're using the equipment, starting off with equipment like Nautilus, again, always starting off with exercise that you control, in being engaged, because for them, that means an investment in preserving their well-being. And I love to see that. So one of the things that we have to remember is that had you started early on and you maintained that strength, you see it on the red light, the top part of the figure over here, you would have been able to maintain a higher level of strength. And even if you got older, you would be at the same level as a young 20-year-old now. I can only hope I'll get, be able to keep that in another few years. I keep going at it and I keep pushing. But the reality is if we get too low, again, always remember, what does that mean? It's not just about activity. It's about being able to do the basic functional things that we love to do. Now, I don't know if you love to go, mow your lawn or do all the gardening, but it does require a certain level of strength. And the good thing is that at the end of the day, we can preserve that. And through resisting training, we can essentially offset this deterioration, this atrophy that's going on in the muscle, and keep that muscle quality. So maintaining function is not just about, again, trying to be a perfect athlete. That's not the point of physical activity. It's about investing in your well-being, investing in your health. As I said earlier, you've spent your lifetime working. Now's the time to invest in your wellness, which is never too late to start. And that's important, as we see down over here on the far bottom left. We can start late in life, even starting resistance training, and get the improvements in muscle capacity. Now, what's exciting, okay? And a lot of people say, you know what, Glenn, I don't want to do resistance training. I don't want to have big muscles. Believe me, it'll take you a while to get big muscles. What you want is quality of muscle. You want to preserve that muscle. And just off the first 4 weeks, and we showed that with our own clinical trials with patients with type 2 diabetes, after 4 weeks, they saw 100% to 200% improvements in muscle strength just by doing the exercise, because your brain has to teach the muscle how to contract, how to recruit that muscle. So as a result of that, what you end up seeing is the nervous system adapting. Just doing the exercise, you gain that strength, and that improves your vitality. That preserves your autonomy. That preserves and reduces any risk of disability caused by a fall. So when we think about it and we put it all together, and we think about physical activity, and we think about muscle strength training, we think about these activities and the benefits to the health and the higher level of fitness, at the end of the day, this all means that we're protecting ourselves against having our deterioration in our well-being. And that could be, having different health outcomes. That could, maybe it's development of diabetes or just the worsening of your pre-existing health condition. You can protect against that. Now, the one thing as well, and we talk about this, you probably heard as well, the need for flexibility. Flexibility, again, will come with aerobic training, will come with strength training. A lot of people talk about, we heard this in our clinical trials, people always said, well, you need to do flexibility training because with strength training, you're going to affect your flexibility. That's not true. With doing proper movements and proper extensions and learning to do it correctly, you absolutely will gain that flexibility. And there's nothing wrong with doing flexibility exercise, which, again, you may require somebody to show you some of these exercises. And one of the good things is here at the University of Ottawa, we have a lot of young graduates who would love to have people like you and work with people like you to exchange your knowledge. They may not have had all the years of experience like you have, but they are able to at least give you some guidance and say, here's how to start off. Here's how to progress based off of your current state of health. So always think about the benefits of exercise. There's a myriad of benefits. I'm not going to repeat them, but ultimately, one of the beautiful things about exercise, it's really an investment protecting against any negative health outcomes. But certainly, it doesn't prevent them, but it certainly will delay or at least reduce the risk. And certainly you're seeing a lot of other factors, like one of the ones that I think is so important is really about just your overall mental function and being able to preserve your overall well-being. What do I mean by that? So one of the things that we do know with physical activity is that if physical activity really engages the central nervous system, and my dad, one of the things he always wanted to do is he always was, doing these mathematical equations and trying to read things and always trying to keep his mind active. And one thing I got him doing, even in his 80s is I had him, had him bike on his bike downstairs, and he would go and spend an hour. And one of the things that I tried to get him to realize is that physical activity is helpful for the mind, because guess what? Even if you're doing muscle training, strength training, you have to remember all of these activities, whether you're going to mow the lawn, whether you're going to wash the windows, any new activity, the brain is sitting down there, it's formulating a plan. It's now you're not thinking about it. You may visualize it. You may see, I'm going to be doing this. I got to do this kind of activity. But your brain, as you're going through the activity, is memorizing and it's trying to generate that action plan. And that allows the body, the central nervous system, to be activated, and its level of arousal gets heightened. And physical activity can improve, as we see here from these studies, can improve overall well-being, mental function, the mind, safeguard the health of the mind. And you can see that it would reduce the risk of developing dementia and Alzheimer's disease. So that's very important as well. It's not only the physical component, that is the muscles, the lungs, the heart, it's also the mind. So when we talk about aerobic activity, what should you do in terms of activities? Well, listen, there's a number of different activities, and I would always recommend diversity. Certainly, if you have the ability to exercise at home because you're fortunate to have a bike, then make that your plan to at least have that structured component, at least I would argue, at least 3 times a week for 30 minutes. Get on there. If you're going for a brisk walk around the block, think about it from, again, moderate to vigorous, and plan out and make that part of your physical activity. If it's cycling or if it's golfing, do it without a cart. If it's, again, you're going to go do some vacuuming, make it part of your activity, meaning that get into it, make it more intense. Now, you don't want to be going crazy, but yes, make that part. If you're going to wash your windows, if you're going to, do some gardening. But again, physical activity that requires whole body effort is going to be an activity that's going to tax your heart, your lungs, and your muscles to allow that adaptation that's going to be so very important. So let's talk about the transition from intensity. So let's go from inactivity, that winter inactivity, to what we need to do right now. So question I'm always asked is, what should I do? The bigger challenge that we have, obviously, as you're starting off, folks, is really knowing what are your capacities. So one of the things that we do here, and when we have members of your association come here, we do fitness assessments. So you have a sense of what that exercise intensity should be. Now, if anybody that's on this presentation today has come to our research unit, you may have had a fitness evaluation. And when you do a fitness evaluation, usually we do a progressive exercise. It's about 8 to 12 minutes. And we measure your rate of oxygen consumption because we want to know what that maximum level is. And once we know that, we can then determine the effort that you need to work at. So that's one way of doing it. Now, perhaps that you don't have and you don't want to come in, or there's no other facilities nearby, but you want to be engaged and you want to know what that exercise intensity is. So let's think about it. If you ever gone walking outdoors and you maybe walked with a friend, and that friend essentially has been inactive, and you're an exerciser, you're going out there and you're exercise all the time, and you notice as you're talking to that person, they're looking at you and they really want you to shut up. And usually that happens because you'll see that they're breathing a little heavier. They're going, okay, now please, you need to stop, right? And people panic when they get to that level. Of course, you always have to be careful in trying to make sure that this is not an underlying health condition that's causing that. But you'll have to remember that as you get into higher exercise intensity, you cross a threshold where as you start to take in more oxygen, you're also starting to generate what's called lactic acid. I'm not going to get complicated by that, but it simply means that your muscles are working harder. And so one thing you can use is that threshold where you're not able to keep a good conversation. If you can keep a good conversation, you're at the lower end. If you can keep that conversation, reasonably well, now you're getting into moderate. And as you get a little higher and you can't really hold that conversation, you want that person to shut up. I say that respectfully. that will tell you that you're probably in the vigorous, moderate to vigorous, and that's a good intensity. Because you got to remember, folks, and you're still not at 100%. That's the interesting thing. What you need to realize to improve for that muscle, to do that adaptation, to say, okay, Glenn, I see you're working me hard today. Now I'm gonna do a little adaptation, see what happens in the next few days. If I hit it again, it's gonna say, oh boy, I've got to start making some changes here. There will be that adaptation, but you got to work and stress that muscle out to be able to see that adaptation. So when you look at what I'm presenting over here, and it says 2 hours, 30 minutes, 150, that should be your minimum target. And as you can see, also it shows you 75 minutes. So why am I giving you two different ones? Well, the way to start off is you start off low intensity, low duration. As with our clinical trials, you start off low, just get accustomed to walking. Start walking first before you start chewing gum. After that, as you get into walking, you start to lengthen. It's volume first. So again, I'm not saying I hear people say, I walked 2 hours today. That's not the good way, because in the first few weeks, you got to adapt. Otherwise, there's going to be muscle soreness and there's going to be more fatigue, and you want the body to recover. Proper recovery and regeneration, it takes around 24 to 48 hours after a training session, an intense one, for the body to adequately recover. So give yourself that time. So slow and low, meaning low intensity, then start to increase the duration, start to increase slightly, go slightly longer, and now drop back a bit more, the duration, increase the intensity, add a bit more volume, longer duration, go from 10, 15, 20, 30. Okay, now increase slightly the intensity, drop back a bit, 20, 30, and continue that. And mark it down on your paper. Because again, it could be maybe you do a tour around the block. Maybe you're walking on the treadmill at X miles an hour, X% grade. Well, the beauty is you have a way of marking your progression. So if you're going around a block, you would then say, okay, today I did it in 30 minutes. As you increase intensity, that means you're going to go faster. Then you did it in 28 minutes. Those are signs of improvement. If you're walking on the treadmill, you go from 5 miles, so you wouldn't be walking at 5 miles, you'd be jogging at 5 miles. But let's say you were walking at 3 miles an hour, then within a few days now with 0% grade, you're at 3.2 miles per hour, 2% grade. Mark that down. That's an improvement. That means you are seeing adaptation. So the other thing we want to add to this, as you see over here, is that 2 days of resistance training per week. That combination, folks, in all of our clinical trials show you it's a win-win-win. It's a win because as you're increasing muscle mass, you're increasing the quality of the muscle. It enhances your aerobic capacity because now you're strengthening the stability of your joints. You're also strengthening the muscle to be able to support you to do the exercise, and you're building that aerobic capacity. All right, so very, very important. Muscle strength training, well, that's another one that essentially, if you love to be, outdoors and doing things, maybe it's washing your windows. It doesn't need to be the dumbbell curls, right? Standing in front of the mirror and doing dumbbells curls. It need not be that. There's lots of different ways to do strength training. The good thing, however, even again, you working outside, you have to remember that it won't target all the important muscles. But what you want to do when you are doing any kind of resistance training is to target the muscle. So always remember, you need to target the muscles so that the muscle can improve. Now, there's different other approaches. And again, that's doing calisthenic exercise, Pilates, if you love Pilates, or yoga or Tai Chi. All of those things are important. And certainly yard work can certainly stress out the body as well. But there's, again, the important thing is to target the muscles. So if you do go to places like Fit for Less or YMCA or wherever you go, and you see those Nautilus type machines, that's where you want to go. Why? Because it's targeted, controlled movements, and it's those machines load the muscle through the full range. This is sharply different from when you're doing resistance training with free weights. The load on the muscle through the full range is not the same. So start off by learning, and you start off by doing the exact same thing we said about aerobic. You start off low intensity, higher volume. So you'd be probably doing around 12, upper limit 15 repetitions. And that's repetitions with controlled movement to a point of just fatigue. And you allow yourself at least a minute to 2 minutes of recovery in between sets. You could do 2 to 3 sets for each muscle group. Now, importantly as well, you need to target all your muscles. You don't do them all in the same day, and you never start off with a small muscle group. So what am I saying by small muscle groups? Your biceps, your triceps, your shoulder muscles. You have to remember the smaller muscle groups, if they get tired and you start using your larger muscle groups, which would be your chest muscles, your back muscles, your leg muscles, before, and you do your small muscle groups before, these muscles, the biceps, the triceps, arm muscles, are there to support the major muscle groups. So be careful and do it systematically. And if you need help, reach out to experts out there. Like I said, a lot of young talent out there that could be willing to work with you and give you some of their expertise and guidance. Like I said, they may not have all of the years of experience, but they have been trained to at least allow you to understand the progressions that you need. And again, one of the most important things is really what I see in the wintertime. I see a lot of falls. I see, the effects of inactivity late in the winter, where people, because they get fatigued and they don't have that same muscle strength, is there a higher risk for falls. And it does not take much. Folks, when you're unstable, what's going to put you back in a stable position is your muscle's ability to react, right? So if I'm falling, my body has to adjust. And to adjust, muscles need to contract. And the quality of the muscle matters here, because when the muscle's trained, it can respond to a load shift. So it's important from a strength training, but also you can do balancing exercise. I wouldn't recommend that if you're starting off, that you don't do them alone, or you do it with support, meaning you could do it allowing your counters. And you can do these very basic types of balancing, heel walking, toe walking, and standing from a sitting position. You don't think about it, but standing from sit to stand really improves your balance. So stretching activities are equally important. They're going to enhance also the gains that you're going to see in your strength. Remember, because then as you improve flexibility and get through that full range of motion, you'll also see improvements in strength. But where are we going with all this? Where are we going? What we're trying to say to you is, at this stage in your lives, is this about investing in you, investing in having a quality of life that's going to be rewarding. You're going to go through your day and you may engage in physical activity that's demanding. The good thing is, at the end of the day, it's going to be a really good feeling of, I'm tired, but not tired to the point that it's an exhaustive tired that you want to stay in bed all night. You're going to recover more quickly. That's what exercise does, allow you to recover more quickly. And the thing to remember here, folks, doesn't matter what age you are, it's never too late to start. That's something I said to my dad. It's never too late to start. And do that, be active, and you're going to see that you will gain, you will see some progressions. So I won't repeat what I've been saying about the importance of exercise in maintaining your health, but healthy living must incorporate regular exercise. And that will give you positive thinking, overall well-being, and you will feel good. This all comes with planning appropriate exercise programming. Not easy sometimes, but you have to write things down. You have to get organized. So one thing to always remember is that sometimes you can go through some muscle soreness or a minor muscle injury or an injury period. So when that happens, what I want you to remember is take a step back. And if it's a leg injury, yes, maybe you won't be able to do that whole body exercise, aerobic activity, but you can do some upper body exercises with strength training while sitting. So if it does occur, just take a step back. You're not going to lose that much in this very short period, in the few weeks that it will probably take you to recover. When you do slowly recover, what you want to do is slowly progress into the exercise. Again, you come back to start off with low volume, low intensity, and work your way up again. You can work more quickly now at accelerating that transition from reducing volume, increasing intensity, extending that volume, and then so forth. But before you get, if you've not been physically active before that, I want you to remember that inactivity is important here. So if you have been inactive, remember, start off slow and make sure that you have, if you have any underlying health conditions, that you do get screened by your physician to say, listen, am I okay? Especially given I've been inactive here for a long time, especially in the wintertime is not so bad. If you have underlying health condition, always be cautious. All right. And again, being active, start off with light, always start off with light activity and work your way upwards. That's the most important thing because you want to reduce injury, the risk of injury. I'm sure all of you know the benefits of exercise. We know how important it is. The challenge will be, and we know the benefits. That's the thing. Everybody knows it. It's really about how to put it into play. There's no easy way, folks. It's just logical, controlled activity. It could be part of your activity. Like I said, it could be vacuuming, could be gardening, and then have those structured periods where you dedicate yourself just to doing that exercise, whether it be treadmill walking, elliptical work, semi-recumbent cycling, do it. Say, I'm going to dedicate myself 3 times a week, 30 minutes, then do it. And if you can on that day, and I used to say to my patients when they were, when they were part of the diabetes program, I would say to them, listen, I get that you're working all day long. I get that. And it's tiring at the end of a long day. You work 9 to 5, 8 to 5, 8 to 6, and then you're making your way home and family's waiting for you, supper's on the go. And then you make that decision, they're driving down Maryville Road and they see the YMCA, the Maryville Mall, and they're saying, they see the sign, what do I do? What do I do? And it's always hard because you feel so unwell. Even if you don't feel good, the beautiful thing is if you make that decision, even if you do 10 minutes or 15 minutes and you stimulate the body, I guarantee you the body's going to reward you with an adaptation. So do it. So one thing, again, it's all about physical activity affecting you by, again, reducing that level of fatigue, improving your energy reserves, also making you less likely to, again, get injured, but also allowing you to recover more quickly from an illness, whether it be COVID-19 as an example. And it certainly will give you an overall zest for living, an overall zest for life and being active. But you need to plan, as I said. And if you need guidance and you need help, you reach out. My team would be happy to give you some guidance and some information on how best to take the first steps if you've never done it before, or if you're active and you're seeing yourself, listen, I'm just not seeing improvement. Then we bring you in here and we can do that fitness assessment for you, or find somewhere in Ottawa that would do that for you. So a few things to leave you with. Understand the risk, yet be confident that physical activity can be safe. Choose the types of physical activities that are appropriate for your current fitness levels. Don't go rock climbing when you don't have the strength, right? When you don't have the functional capacity. Increase physical activity gradually over time to meet key guidelines or health goals. If previously inactive, start low and go slow. Then you have protect. Protect yourself by using gear and sports equipment. Choose a safe environment and make sensible choices about when and where and how to be active. And finally, consult. Never be afraid to consult. Even if you don't have a chronic disease, consult. Make sure that you have the proper knowledge to be able to make appropriate decisions in the programs you want to do. Or if it's just to be physically active, discuss it with your healthcare giver and make sure you're safe. And finally, my last one for today is really just don't forget, as we transition from winter to summer, the challenges you're going to face are going to be a hotter summer, a warm summer day. So remember, when you are working in the heat, your heart works harder. That creates more fatigue and it can affect your performance. So train in the morning, early in the morning, or go to a club that has a cooled environment. If you got to do activity, do it later in the evening. Same thing. Remember, body temperature can rise, so monitor yourself, because again, that could have a detrimental effect on your health and well-being. So I leave it at that. Thank you very much. I want to thank National Association of Federal Retirees. What a bunch, an amazing bunch of people. And I've had the real pleasure of working with many of you. And certainly I'd also like to thank Health Canada for having supported our research here as well. So thank you very much, everybody, and I appreciate your time.